Writing comics can be a challenge for those of us who are mostly focused on drawing them. It is hard to make choices on where to start the story, or how many characters to include, or how long should each scene be. Especially when you know everything you're writing is going to take months or even years to draw. The main reason why this was hard for me to begin with is because I didn't have a process or a method that I was following. I only had a bunch of ideas and writing theories that got mixed up in my head and became this overwhelming mass that made me feel incompetent. But now I have a magic spreadsheet that gives me all the support I need. And I also have a simple way of writing dialogue that makes it really fun for me. And by the way, my name is Teresa, I am a comic artist and illustrator, and in this video I'm going to give you a simple method to write your comics that will take you from the blank page to a finished chapter of your story in no time. So let's get started. First, the tools you need. To follow this tutorial, you will either need pencil or paper, or another type of digital tool, such as the spreadsheet I'm going to use, or a blank Word document. It would also be useful to have drawing software or a tablet. I'm personally using Google Docs, Google Sheets, and Clip Studio Paint. So now that you have your tools, let's get to step number 1, which is you need an idea. Don't get stuck on having a great idea. This is just an exercise to get you some practice, and if you get stuck on having great ideas for your first few comics, 2 things are likely to happen. Number 1, you will take too long to have your first idea, and therefore you won't get as much practice as you could if you just go with the first one that sounds fun. And number 2, when you get a great idea, you always want to do it justice. And because you have never practiced making comics before, you won't do it justice, and this will lead to frustration and probably quitting. Basically, what I'm saying is that I prefer to save my great ideas for when I'm really good at this, and in the meantime, I'm gonna learn and have some fun with other ideas that I find attractive and fun and interesting, but I don't think they are the best. It's the same for me as not buying the best ingredients for your first time trying a recipe. Step number 2 is to summarize your story in one line. Every story, no matter how complex, can be summarized in one sentence. That one sentence is the heart of the story. Generally, this line will contain your protagonist or protagonists, their goals, and their opponent. For my comic, Graduation Nightmares, the line is, "This is a story of a girl who wants to stop having nightmares by taking action in real life." Other examples from popular culture would be, "This is a story of a young elemental mage who wants to fulfill his destiny without compromising who he is." Or another example, "This is the story of 2 young brothers that want to get back home by crossing a dark fairy tale forest." Bear in mind, all stories, when reduced to a one-liner, may sound too simple or generic. But it is in the execution that these one-liners become the great stories that we love. And these one-liners are also a way to keep us on track, because you don't want to be that person telling a story who rambles and gets sidetracked, and especially not when you have to draw the story and it takes so long. So go ahead, try to summarize your story in one line that will force you to get to the heart of it. Step 3, the theory. Now that you have the tools and your idea summarized in one line, it is time to look at the theory. Having a philosophy or a theory you follow when you write is a great way to avoid getting lost and overwhelmed. There are many popular and useful writing theories, such as Dan Harmon's story circle or the classic 3 of structure. Or maybe you want to try Joseph Campbell's hero's journey. All of them are great, and they will help you structure your overall story when you get lost. Personally, I have simplified all of these methods in protagonist is no longer happy because, and they have to do stuff in order to achieve their final goal. If they don't achieve this goal, which is a possibility, you are simply writing a tragedy, and that is also good. Personally, I attach to this a theme, which is an abstract concept behind the story. It doesn't have to be super deep or any moral lesson or anything very brainy. It can be a simple observation like, you shouldn't stop trying just because you failed, or anybody can be a great artist. To me, a story should always contain some message or reflection. There is something you're trying to say, otherwise why are you bothering telling the story? Step number 4 is to start planting your seeds or laying your foundations. Now, this is a question of personality. Some writers are gardeners and some writers are architects. This is the analogy that George R.R. Martin used to explain the tendency that some writers have to start with nothing, which is what I do with this basic structure I just gave you, is how I start, and then start planting seeds, things that might or might not go anywhere. I don't know if they're going to go anywhere, but they're there because I find them interesting. In the future, of course, I will have to go back and erase all those seeds that never went anywhere to make the story more cohesive. Architects, on the other hand, are writers that need to have a very structured idea, a blueprint, an exact blueprint of what the story is going to be like. So for these writers, this is the moment to go back into his writing theories and start laying out the whole series of events and story beats that are going to take place in the story in a very organized way. So where the gardener revises the entire story, the architect revises the plot structure a lot. Revision and editing is part of writing. For architects, it happens a lot at the beginning, and for gardeners, it happens when the story is finished and we realize, oh, half of this was completely irrelevant. But that's the way it is. Step number 5, you're gonna write your chapter, and this is where my magic spreadsheet comes into play. My spreadsheet is based on the writing theory of scene and sequel. A scene or a sequel are two types of written passages or sections of a story. They are both used to advance the plot of the story. In a scene, the story goes forward because the characters are attempting to achieve a goal. Whereas in the sequels, the characters are provided with an opportunity to react to what happened in the scene, to reflect and make the decision on what to do next. The pace of a story is marked by the balance between the scenes and the sequels. If you have a story filled with scenes where characters are constantly acting to achieve goals without any reflection, the story will feel frantic and it won't make a lot of sense. Whereas a film that is full of sequels, where characters are constantly reflecting and thinking about what to do next without actually doing anything, would be terribly boring. So with my magic spreadsheet, what you get is your one line of what happens in that scene or sequel, and then you get what characters are involved, and then the setup, development, and payoff. I also have 2 other columns for what was my personal objective with that scene, and if there are any elements of foreshadowing, because I love when a story foreshadows things and I can say at the end, I knew it, I'm so clever. When you write a scene, the setup is the goal. You have your characters and they have a goal and they're going for it. The development is that in the pursuit of that goal, there is a conflict, something that is stopping them from getting that goal. And the payoff is the disaster. They don't get to achieve that goal because there's some sort of conflict or something goes wrong. That is the basic structure of a scene. On the other hand, in a sequel, you react to what happened in the scene. So the setup will be the reaction. The development will be the dilemma. The character or characters have to make a decision on what is the next course of action. And the payoff will be to witness those characters making that decision and moving forward to the next scene. So feel free to copy that spreadsheet or get it from the comment section and start laying out what are the different scenes and sequels that are going to take your heroes from the beginning of the chapter to the next part of the story. Step 6 is to break your scenes and sequels into the action that it takes to complete the setup, the development, and the payoff. So all you're doing is breaking down those 3 stages into the smaller steps that it takes to achieve them. For instance, if your setup is that people arrive at the club, people are at home, people take a taxi, people arrive at the club. And those are your first 3 pages. If you want the pace to be faster, maybe you can just do it in 1 page, where they leave the house, take the taxi, and then arrive to the club at the end of the page. This is what will definitely alter the pace of your story, how fast those micro steps are taken and how many of them you are showing. The important thing at this stage is to avoid 2 things. You don't want to rush and you don't want to rumble. You don't want to rush because if you skip too many steps, people will be confused as to how did the characters get to a place or performed an action. So make sure that you are showing at least a minimum of actions that clarify to people reading what is going on. And the second thing you don't want to do is rumble, which is you don't want to show every little action, how they open the door of the taxi, how they sit down, unless that's the type of story you want to tell, of course. So choosing how you elongate or shorten each period of time and how many actions you show is the key to controlling the pace of your story. So make a decision here. Do you want a very meditative story where you show each little action? Or you want a fast-paced story where people sometimes have to look back and say like, how did they get there? Who is this person? Where did they come from? Or maybe you want to find a balance. But whatever you choose, you're gonna have to make that choice on your own without any help. So good luck in finding your style. The way I do it is I break it down with these little blue lines of text that you can see where I put what happens at the beginning of the page and what happens at the end of the page. And I want to make sure that something changes in a page, because for me, a page in a comic is a unit of change. Something must have changed. I should move forward towards the end goal of that scene or sequel. Once you have all your blue lines completed, it is time for step 7, which is writing the dialogue. Now this is my personal favorite part. What I do is I identify the mood of the scene. Is it a sad scene, contemplative scene, or is it maybe a frantic action scene? Whatever the mood is, I identify it, I choose music that gets me into that mood, and then I start writing dialogue inspired by the mood of those songs that I'm listening to. Don't worry too much about the dialogue being perfect, because you will be able to review it once you are done. Remember, editing is writing. So it's okay, just finish those scenes and then go back and revise it. Step 8, you have to now draw the tiny thumbnails. Now you have to think these people are having a conversation, they're having a dialogue, but how does it look on the page? Personally, the way I do thumbnails is first I do them tiny, as you can see in the images. And that's because I want to see how the composition looks. I don't want to get stuck looking at the anatomy or the lettering or any of the particulars of each panel. I just want to see how it looks in general as a whole page, and how do the pages look next to each other. I use Pinterest boards and other comics for reference and for inspiration. So what I normally do is I flick through my favorite comics, I get some ideas, and then I get started. Just trust your sense of taste and your acquired knowledge of comics and how comics should read, and go for it. Make it look nice. Make it look the way you like it to look. Step number 9. I get those tiny thumbnails into actual size thumbnails. I do this for 2 reasons. Number 1, to see what space does the lettering actually take. And secondly, because I use these thumbnails for my beta readers. I always do callouts for beta readers and I have them look at it. Which takes me to step number 10, which is I give it to beta readers and I listen to their feedback. I do feedback with beta readers with 3 basic concepts. I use the ABCs of beta reading, which is, did you find anything amazing? Did you find anything boring? And did you find anything confusing? Making a special emphasis on the C, confusing. If there's something that consistently is being labeled as confusing or consistently being labeled as boring, if I see those patterns emerge, then I make changes. If it's one person's opinion, then I don't give it much importance, because that's down to personal taste, and maybe our personal tastes just don't match. And that is it. I hope you found these 10 steps useful. And if you have any questions, you can leave them in the comments down below, and subscribe if you would like to see future videos on writing and drawing comics. Until then, I hope you have fun drawing your comics, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye bye!